Hello, community. I felt the need to share with you what was happening to us when we started living in the house with the well. I live in San Luis Potosi, yes, the capital, on Cuauhtémoc Street. People from around here surely know or have heard that there are tunnels running under that avenue connecting to the churches, and that it is one of the oldest streets. My parents' house is no exception, since it has a water well that still functions to this day. It had never stopped producing water until a few months ago, when the drought began in the state. When you get close to that well, you feel your body go cold, a chill that we, as children, used to attribute to its depth. And I say used to because ever since we started hearing noises and voices calling out to us, we stopped thinking about that explanation. One quiet day after eating and watching television, I was playing with my brother. At that time, we were 14 and 11 years old, respectively. We heard the sound of people talking coming from the patio where that well is located. We did not think much of it. We assumed our mom had visitors, until we heard, in a low tone of voice, someone saying to us, "Hijos, vengan, children, come here." So we went down to the patio. However, there was absolutely no one there. We called out to our mom, asking what was going on, but there was no response. We decided to keep playing and go back upstairs, but right when we reached the halfway point on the stairs, we heard the front door open. It was our mom coming home from the store with tortillas for our meal. My brother looked at me in horror and asked, "But you heard them calling us too, right?" I could only answer yes, but I suggested maybe it was our neighbor. I did not want to scare him or ruin that afternoon of games. At that moment, we had no idea that it would be the first of many incidents that would happen there. Out of all those incidents, the one that would instill in me a fear of getting near that cursed well happened exactly on March 7th, 2016, one day before my birthday. I was alone in the house. My parents and siblings had gone to another state for a sports competition, and like any teenager, I thought it was the perfect weekend. I would have the house to myself to enjoy and break in my new television. I was in the kitchen, making my lunch, when I heard that same cursed voice again saying, "Hijo, ven, son, come." But this time, I heard it right in my ear. I was certain there was no one else there, so I tried to simply ignore it. I know that might not make sense, but that is what I did. Pretend I did not hear it. "Hijo, ven, sal, son, come out." I heard it again a few minutes later, but more distant this time. My body was beginning to feel overwhelmed by fear. I tried to brush it off, but that was only the beginning of what would become the most terrifying weekend of my life. I finished eating, and as I went upstairs, I saw a black silhouette in the middle of the living room with its right arm extended. It was completely motionless, just standing there. It stayed until I turned fully to face it, and then it vanished, but not before I heard that voice again. "Hijo, sal, son, come out." I ran to my room as fast as I could, trying to calm myself down, telling myself it was just my imagination. For a few hours, everything remained calm. I took a nap, but I could not stop thinking about that voice calling me, "Hijo, ven, son, come." What ended my nap was the sound of someone knocking on my door, and they were knocking in the way my mom always does. 4 knocks with a particular rhythm. I got up, disoriented, thinking maybe they had arrived and were letting me know. But my parents were not going to be back until Tuesday. I stood there, staring at the door, when I heard, once again, and with exactly my mom's voice, "Jacobo, ven, baja, hijo. Jacobo, come downstairs, son." I was in shock. I did not know what to do. I grabbed my scapular that I always keep under my pillow and tried to pray, but I kept forgetting the prayers. I could not even complete one Our Father because everything was slipping my mind. I closed my eyes, thinking maybe I had dozed off again. Suddenly I heard knocking at the door once more, but now it was coming from my parents' bedroom. I got up and walked slowly, fully alert to see what was happening. I found nothing. I had no idea what was going on. I went back to my room, and as if by magic, I was able to pray again. That gave me some sense of calm, and I continued doing my things. Night fell and I got hungry. I walked through the hallway that leads to the stairs, and just as I started going down, I heard the voice again. The one that wanted me to believe it was my mom. Jacobo, ven, estoy en el patio. Jacobo, come, I am in the patio. I did not know what to do. I glanced upward at the huge skylight, trying to calm myself when I saw it again, that silhouette with its arm extended. But this time it did not leave. This time I looked directly at it and it just stayed there. Little by little, as I kept looking, it took shape. A woman with long hair and very, very long, thin arms. I was frozen, stunned. I tried to cry, but I could not. It was as if I were outside my own body. I just looked at it, and it looked back at me. It did not move. It was just there, watching. When I finally came back to my senses, I looked at my watch. 40 minutes had passed, and I did not remember a single thing from that period. I felt like it had only been a few seconds. I went downstairs and tried to calm myself. I made tea and a sandwich just to think about something else, to do something mechanical that would pull me out of that terror for a moment. Just for a moment. Right when I was about to take a bite of my food, I heard it again. Hijo, son. This time the tone was angrier, as though scolding me, but it was still my mom's voice. I lost my patience and yelled, "Ya, tú no eres mi mamá. Enough. You are not my mom." Then there was silence, followed by laughter. Laughter that, to this day, still haunts me. I had no idea how to react to that. I prayed again, and I kept hearing, Jacobo, hijo, Jacobo, son. There was nothing else I could do. I could not sleep or pretend none of this was happening. I gathered my things and called my grandmother, who was still alive at the time and lived just a few streets away. I grabbed the phone to ask if I could stay at her place for the weekend, but I could not recall her number, even though to this day, I still know it by heart. In that moment, I simply could not dial it. I gave up, tried to calm myself, and decided to go without warning. I knew if I told my grandmother everything, it would get better. As I made my way across the entry hallway, toward the front door, the house phone started ringing, and it used the special ringtone we had assigned to my grandmother. I could not believe it. I felt like my grandmother already knew what was happening, and that was why she was calling me. I answered, and she asked, "Mijo, is everything okay? You called, but all I could hear was your breathing, and before you hung up, you said, adios. Is everything all right? Do you want your grandfather to come over?" And just when I was about to tell her that, no, nothing was all right, I heard it again. Hijo, ven. Son, come. Abuela, grandma. But now it was no longer my mother's voice. It was the same voice that had laughed before. I ran, leaving everything behind. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I used my keys, but none of them worked. It was as if it were a different lock. I did not know what to do. I did not want to go back inside for some reason, yet I felt somewhat safe in that entry hallway, almost as if out there, I could not feel or hear any of the things that had just happened. Finally, exhaustion overcame me, and I fell asleep right there. I did not feel the cold, I felt nothing, I just slept. I thought maybe it was all a dream, a nightmare. I was awakened by the drizzle from the rain. When I realized I was still in the hallway, I knew that nightmare was far from over. It was 2 a.m. I felt calmer, having rested a bit, and I summoned my courage. I ran through the hallway to get to the patio, but the instant I arrived, I froze, stunned. There she was, the woman I had seen before, right next to the well, with her arm extended, pointing at it. She was smiling, a smile that I could just make out in the darkness. I saw her lips moving, but I could not hear anything, almost as if she wanted me to come closer. I did not want to, but it was as though I had no control over my body. I walked a few steps until I reached a pillar that supports the roof. I do not know how, but I managed to stop myself there, and then I heard her again, with that demonic voice. Ven, baja, conmigo. Come down, with me. In my mind, I prayed and prayed, and somehow I was able to run to my room and lock myself in. I knew it would not be long until morning, so I stayed there with all the lights on. Sunrise came and the rain stopped. I turned off the lights, and with my scapular in hand, I went downstairs as if nothing had happened. There were no signs that anyone had been there. I took my keys and my things, but not before noticing that the cover over that cursed well had no padlock on it, the same padlock my dad always told us never to remove so that no accident would occur. I do not know who removed it. Maybe I did, during one of those moments when I was not aware of what was going on. Or maybe it was her. Maybe it was that voice. It looked like a coyote, but of an enormous size, like something that was not from this world. That thing had a mouth, not a snout. I only heard my companion screaming that he could not fire his rifle. That brave soldier, who would go out to look for farmland and drug traffickers in the mountains, was now crying, pale, and had even wet himself out of fear. That is how this story begins. We were out there in the Sierra de Chilapa. The people who have followed me for many years already know that my brigade usually departed from Guerrero. We would go to eradicate nerves before heading up into the mountains, and right before going up, an elderly woman approached us to warn us. She asked us to be very careful because the fields in that area were not ordinary. We would not only encounter armed resistance, the kind we were already used to handling, but those fields were also protected by witches and aguales. I did not believe in those things. I was not superstitious, and I did not want to let my imagination run wild and mess with my head. I thought nothing would happen, but one of my companions answered the woman very seriously, saying, "Do not worry, ma'am. That is why I always carry holy water with me." The corporal was from Chilapa and said that this warning was something very serious. One night, after having animal cracker cookies and coffee for dinner, the sergeant and the officer set up the guard shifts. I went to sleep, but around 2 in the morning, we started hearing a commotion and gunshots outside. We all rushed out, weapons ready, thinking that the people guarding the fields had come to catch us off guard at that hour. Outside the tents, the lieutenant asked one of the soldiers on watch where the shots were coming from. He pointed to a place among the trees and said that Carranza and El Pepino, 2 of our companions, were over there. So we headed in that direction with caution. Another burst of gunfire rang out, and we heard screams, indescribable screams of pain. We thought one of our companions had been wounded, but when we arrived, we found Carranza sobbing, wetting himself in fear, pale as if he had seen the very devil. We asked him what had happened, but he could not even speak from terror. There was no sign of our other companion, El Pepino. We put some rubbing alcohol under Carranza's nose to wake him, and when he managed to calm down a little, he told the lieutenant that the thing they had seen was not from this world. He said it looked like a coyote but was bigger than a person, that it did not have a snout, but rather a mouth, and that it was laughing, mocking them. It did not even give them time to fire their rifles. It escaped into the night at a speed that was not normal. Immediately, the lieutenant took half of our personnel to go look for the missing companion, and to my bad luck, I had to go. I put on my vest and jacket, and off we went. Something very strange to me was that we saw animal tracks, but they were huge, extremely large. Also, the branches we saw broken, which it had left in its path, were high up and thick. I noticed the corporal from Chilapa was sprinkling holy water on his magazines and his rifle. "What are you doing, Corporal?" I asked. "What we are following is not an animal," he replied. I was on edge, feeling my heart pounding with my nerves shot, in the early morning darkness, with not the slightest idea of what had attacked us. After about 3 kilometers of following that beast's trail, We found the missing soldier's G3 rifle near a tree. There were no bloodstains or anything indicating where they had gone. The sergeant found footprints a little farther ahead, human footprints. We followed them along the trail and found our companion's torn uniform shirt. At that moment, I wondered what the hell I was doing out there. We moved forward about 2 more minutes when the lieutenant signaled us to stop. He told us to look ahead. There, about 20 meters away, was that coyote. It was enormous, like a beast, and it was tearing our companion's arm off. That thing saw us, and I swear to you it let out a laugh, a wicked cackle. Corporal Mattis shouted that it was an Nahual, and the lieutenant ordered us to open fire, being careful not to hit our companion. Trembling, I raised my rifle, but when I aimed, that thing was already somewhere else. It moved too fast for us to aim properly under those conditions. But we had to do something, or we would end up like our companion. We fired with caution, and finally that coyote stood up on 2 legs, and laughing again, it started running among the trees. I do not know if it was luck or the power of God, but at that moment, someone landed 2 shots on it, Corporal Chilapa, the one who had put holy water on his weapon. That thing screamed in pain like a human being, and as soon as the corporal realized he had wounded it, he ran after it. I ran over to our companion, the one who was lost. He had lost too much blood. He was already dead. The lieutenant took me along as security while we went to find the corporal, as the transportation was on its way to handle the situation. When we reached the corporal, he was standing guard over that thing's body. It freaked me out because I expected to find the coyote, that beast. But instead, there was an old man of nearly 70 years lying there with 2 gunshot wounds in the chest. I remembered the elderly woman's warning and could almost hear her voice foretelling the dark creatures that guarded those fields in that area. We had to follow the usual procedures for when a companion is killed. We recorded that the old man had surprised our companion and dragged him for kilometers in the night because, of course, if we said it had been a Nahual, they would have called us crazy and probably would have discharged us. I did not believe in Nahualas before that, and even today, I keep telling myself there has to be some explanation. But no matter how much I go over it in my mind, I cannot find one. I cannot explain that enormous coyote running on 2 legs, nor the old man we found dead. We're not done yet, community. Let us know what you think of these stories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps our community continue to grow. And of course, remember to send us your own stories, your family's tales, and your personal experiences, because that's the heart of the dark side. We're continuing with one more story tonight. Last year, I moved to Milpa, Alta because I began working in Xochimilco. It was a very good work opportunity, so I did not hesitate to move, even though I only had 1 week to do it. I rented a small apartment in the town of San Juan de Penac Historic, which was the least inhabited place. The apartment had been built on land that used to be a cactus field. The owner told me there were duendes in that place, but that is a subject for another tale. The building consisted of 4 apartments. We shared the courtyard to park our cars and hang our clothes, and it was located on a very steep slope. I used to come home from work and do my chores, so sometimes I left my clothes out on the line all night so they could dry. In the mornings, before going to work, I would collect them. What happened to me took place precisely one morning when I was about to collect my clothes. That day I was not planning to return to the apartment in the afternoon, so I was going to bring my clothes in regardless of whether they had dried or not. I decided to go out for them at 4:30 in the morning, which was the time I got up. I remember that I turned on the light that lit my apartment door and then went out into the courtyard with a basket to gather my clothes. I started touching the clothes to see which ones had dried and which ones had not, in order not to mix them. Then I realized I was being watched. I froze because generally I was the first to get up among my neighbors, and everything was silent. I turned toward the gate that led to the street, and there she was, a woman, or at least I thought she was, right in the left corner of the gate from the outside, staring at me intently. I do not know how she got there because that street, being a very steep slope, always makes people's footsteps echo loudly. So, if she had walked all the way there, She had probably been waiting in that position for quite a while, or she had simply appeared out of nowhere. I say I think it was a woman, but to this day I do not clearly remember her features. By instinct, I looked toward the small door in the gate, which was always left open. If that thing wanted to come in, it was absolutely possible for it to do so. I thought I had at least a few seconds until it reached me. I glanced at the door of my apartment, which I had left half open, thinking it might be possible to run inside and try to keep her from harming me, to attempt to save myself. When I looked back again, that thing began to smile at me. I believe it had perfectly understood what I was about to do. I was frozen, because that is the only thing I remember about that being. A completely exaggerated smile, one that did not look human. She was mocking the way I was planning to escape her, mocking how afraid I was, and how I wanted to protect myself. It was as if she were floating. That woman glided sideways toward the door without making any sound with her footsteps, and remained in the same position. She stopped for a moment at the small door, as if waiting to see what my reaction would be. I could not run or do any of the things I had thought of doing when I saw her. I was paralyzed. Her smile kept getting even wider until it almost took up her entire face, and then she simply kept floating until she disappeared up the street. As soon as I lost sight of her, I dropped my basket of clothes and ran into my apartment. From that point on, I did not dare go out unless there was daylight, nor did I dare arrive if it was already dark. Whenever I had to return late, I always did so accompanied. Fortunately, this year, I was able to move to another apartment closer to downtown, although Milpa Alta remains a land of Nahuales and witches. I think that what I encountered was one of them.